Welcome to the It's Your Choice podcast, where we learn how to rewire our brains to live the life we desire. On with the show. Welcome to It's Your Choice podcast. Today on the show, we have Kurt Bush. Thank you, Kurt, very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, we all have all kinds of experiences, and especially when we're children, and we're very impressionable, and we feel that everything is normal and it's right and the way it should. And I don't really like to use that word, but we feel like that's just the way life is.
Yeah.
But as we get older, we realize things are very different than it was in our childhood. And then, of course, individually, it's different as well. So I don't want to use the word trauma because sometimes kids do really have trauma. And I'm not saying that I
Yeah.
don't want to use it because I don't believe it, but it doesn't have to really be trauma for us to have our experiences, thoughts, and beliefs that stay with us forever. And those things are not always, well, rarely are true. They're truthful for the moment. But so, how do we kind of deal with those things that now, as we're an adult, we know it was our perspective, our
Mhm.
thought, it was the situation that we were in, but it's really left that imprint on us for our life. And we know now that those things were that situation, but we struggle to let it go or how to deal with it or resolve it. So what can we do to make it better? I guess would be the words.
Yeah, that's a great question. I should only need about 6 hours to answer that question.
That's a big
Yeah,
one.
I think, Sally, I might use the word, well, we in our coaching practice use the word trauma, but we say little t trauma.
Okay.
Little t trauma meaning that we had an encounter or an experience that caused us to believe something either about us or about the world or about how the world works or about how we should be. Or in most cases, I think we learn how to be safe or how to not have too much attention drawn to ourselves or how to not be embarrassed. And I think you're exactly right. Those things often are really good for us when we are younger. I have a story in my first formation. We use the phrase first formation a lot.
Hmm.
Um, that I remember being very embarrassed in front of some third grade classmates. And I think third grade version of me absolutely needed to make some promises to myself that would keep myself safe, keep myself from being embarrassed. But as you said, adult Kurt is not facing embarrassment the same way that third grade Kurt did. I think what happens over time is third grade Kurt turns into fourth grade and fifth grade and all the way
Mm,
up into high school. And that protection, we call them protective promises. Those promises stay in place, and we just do the thing we've always done to protect ourselves. By the time I get to be an adult or we get to be adults, they just stay in place and they're just default.
mm.
I think the key really is twofold. I think self-awareness is key. I think most of us don't even know we do these things, or most of us aren't even aware that our first formation is impacting our behaviors today. But I think maybe more importantly, the idea of reflecting on those things and reflecting what they cause us to do and reflecting on the impact of those things, I think really is the starting point to say, here's the things that I've done, I'm doing, and here's where I want to go in the future.
Yeah, I do agree. It's that recognition there is the
Hmm.
first. And you're right. Even as adults, like we know that time goes by quickly. It seems to go by faster the older
Yeah,
we get. And that
yeah.
does make sense even as a child that we have that experience. And as you said, third grade turns into fourth grade to fifth grade.
Hmm.
And even us as adults, when we have a potential trauma that it happened at, let's say, 30
Yeah,
turns into 35 to 40,
yeah.
and it just keeps rolling in time without um, really noticing. And then that's how, in a lot of cases, we get that, well, it's just the way I am,
Yeah.
or it's just the way he or she is if we're talking about somebody else. And
Yeah.
we all have friends or have said it about ourselves. It's like, well, it's just the way I am.
Yeah, I think that is so profound. I think one of the phrases we use a lot is that this is just what it means to be an adult. This is just how adults adult, if we can use adult as a verb.
Mhm.
I think many of us just fall into this trap of, like you said before, feeling like this is normal and that everybody must feel this way. And if everybody feels this way, then I'm either doing something wrong, feeling like I want something different, or I just need to figure out how to deal with it and, quote, pull myself up from my bootstraps. We just want to say unequivocally that that's just not so, that all of us it might be normal that we're feeling this way. I think we all feel this way to some degree. I think what we would speak against is to say this is not thriving.
Mm.
That there is a better way to live our lives than just simply trying to hold on a white knuckle our lives.
Right. And I think there has been too many one way to do things. Like
Yeah.
it just is this way. And it reminds me of a story, and I've heard various versions of it. So this is the version that I've heard the most is a woman was making a ham for dinner, and as she was preparing it, her husband was home. He cut off the ends of the ham, put it in the pot, put whatever else in it, and put it in the oven. And her husband asked, well, why did you cut off the ends of the ham? And she said, well, because that's how you make it. He's like, I don't think so. So she calls her mom. Mom, why do you cut off the ends of the ham? I said, because that's how your grandmother always made it. It's how you cook a
Mm,
ham. And
yeah.
she called then the grandma and asked why'd you cut off the ends of the ham? And she said, so it would fit in the pot.
I love that story. Yeah. Yeah.
It's and when we don't question, we just see it. And growing up, I mean, it made sense. She cut off the ends. So it's like, oh, that's how you make it,
Yeah.
without questioning and anything. And
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
kind of that's just what we do. And I do think that, I mean, I might go to a bit of an extreme, but I think like we should question almost everything.
I
Why
think
do
so.
I personally believe? And then why
Hmm.
do you believe? But we really need to kind of look internally first
Yeah.
and find why we think and believe what we do. And if
Yeah.
we can't answer that question, then we really need to look deeper, because a lot of times
Yeah.
people would just say, because that's the way it is. Like,
Hmm.
mm,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, yeah, I think what's true is once we see something, we can't unsee it. Once I uncover something in me that is new to me or undiscovered to me, or something that doesn't square with my other guiding principles or values, now I get to do something about it. I don't have to, right? Growth and transformation is not a requirement in life. In
Right.
fact, I think many people don't engage in that work. But
Mhm.
I do think once we uncover those things, now we have agency. Now we can actually take a step forward. But we certainly can't unsee it, right?
Right. Right. That is true. You've talked about before um, what you call protective promises, and then
Hmm.
to replace them with purposeful promises and preferred promises. So I'm aware that the protective promises would be things like grade three Sally went through stuff and have kind of kept
Yeah,
that along the way. How do we make that shift from things that we use to protect us that are still good in certain ways? I don't want to say
yeah,
all those experiences are bad, because we still use them and some of them
yeah,
are still good to this day.
yeah.
I guess there's the differentiate between the ones that are still good or need some
Hmm.
modification, and some we just kind of need to let go of.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point of clarity. Thanks for saying it. Certainly, there are promises, protective promises that maybe are still beneficial today. Um, the world is not an inherently safe place all the time. especially when we're around other humans. I think there's just uh, a natural potential for danger when we're around other humans.
Right.
What we would say is that oftentimes the patterns of behavior that those protective promises cause in us, they are an autopilot that just becomes our default without us thinking about it. So we would say the differentiation comes in to say when we hold up the mirror of reflection and say, here are the things we do, here are the promises we've made. Now we get to choose whether they're serving us well or they're not serving us well. And we would always welcome our clients to say, if that protective promise is still serving you well, please hold it or adapt it or change it or whatever the need be. But sometimes they just need to be set aside. Um,
Right.
I'll give you an example. I learned at an early age that it was unsafe to look incompetent, and unsafe meaning that there were relationships in my life that would change if I looked incompetent, or I would receive different levels of attention or
Mhm.
affection if I looked incompetent. That caused all sorts of patterns of behavior in me as an adult that were not serving me well, nor were they serving the organizations that I worked in either. So I got to set that aside. I could set that one aside because as an adult, certainly someone might look at me and say, "Boy, Kurt is not the most competent person in the world." Absolutely. And the threat of a close relationship of mine as an adult withdrawing from me because I'm incompetent is very minimal. So that one I got to set aside in
Mhm.
favor of a purposeful promise. And the purposeful promise, what we would say about that is that this is a promise that's true about us today. So instead of, I promise Kurt that I'll never look incompetent, the promise now is to address that, to replace that, to set that aside. The promise I've made to myself is now that I am worth being in relationship with. That whether I'm competent or incompetent, I am worthy of being in relationship with others.
Right. And I mean, the competent one, that's a big thing because all of us are competent in a lot of things, and
Yeah.
all of us are incompetent in a lot of things. Like
Yes.
there's tons of things I don't know about, I would not do well in. And
Yeah.
so that's a really big one
Yeah.
to be carrying for many years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's pretty common.
Yes.
Um, I think in our sort of Western society and culture, I think it's pretty common that we're all a little worried about somebody thinking that we're not smart.
Mhm.
And maybe that takes the form. Well, for me, it took the form of sitting around tables with other leaders and not speaking. It took the form of either pulling back, like withdrawing from a situation so that I didn't say something dumb, or I would say way too much, trying to compensate to make
Ah.
sure that you knew what I was talking about. Neither of those, again, neither of those served me well. Neither of them served organizations well, and they were not behaviors that led to my own wholeness.
Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to let you know about the Mind Matters weekly newsletter that is full of actionable tips to help you rewire your brain to live the life that you desire. Sign up for it at sallypeterson.com. And when you do, you'll get the top 5 brain hacks for peak performance. Again, you can get it at sallypeterson.com. Now back to the show. Right. And so is there a difference between the purposeful promises or the preferred promises? Or are they kind of interchangeable?
No, they are different. So we
Okay.
would say that the purposeful replaces the protective, that allows us to be
Hmm.
present in the moment, that
Hmm.
allows me to pause and tell myself truth. So in a moment of anxiety where I get stirred up and triggered by something that feels like danger, That purposeful promise allows me to be present in the moment, to take a breath and say, what's true, right? A preferred promise, we would say, gets us into action. So the preferred promise is the promise we make of how we're going to be going forward. And all these promises are made to ourselves. I'm not making these promises to my business partner. I'm not making them to anybody but myself. So my preferred promise, to replace, well, to get into action around my purposeful promise is this. My preferred promise is I say what's so. As simple as that. That allows me to use my voice. That is a promise I've made that I'm not going to stay quiet when I have something to offer to a conversation. It also allows me to make the choice not to speak. But that's a choice. That's
Hmm.
not a default. That's not a protective measure. That preferred promise, different than the purposeful, that preferred actually moves us into a new future of being.
Right. And that's, I mean, one of the biggest things is we always have a choice.
Yeah.
But first we need to understand, so kind of where
Hmm.
we're at, why we are. And I'm a believer too that our parents did the best job that they could.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
some people were in some bad situations, but they learned from their parents, who learned from
Yeah.
their parents, and as
Yeah.
things change over time, the world is just different. And now
Yeah.
we know so many different things. Like we know way more now than we did generations ago. And so
Yeah.
part of that is the understanding too of the situation that they were in, because I know, and I've said to people often that my thoughts, beliefs, and life is what it is because of my parents, grandparents, school I went to,
Yeah.
environment, all of those things. And that if I was taken at a very young child or infant and moved halfway around the world, my thoughts and
Yeah.
beliefs could be completely different than what they are now. And it's because
Yeah.
of that outer experience that has created the inner. But therefore, then we know that we have new outer experiences to help change the inner.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really good. I mean, I think you said something really important. I think you're absolutely right. Everybody around us, not generally, everyone
Hmm.
is doing the best they can, right? Parents, grandparents, people in our first formation. There are some really horrific exceptions, but I think in general, most families of origin are doing the best they can. You've probably heard the Brene Brown quote that people aren't sucking on purpose just to piss me off. They're doing the best they can with what they've got. Um,
Right.
I I generally believe that to be true.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that you made that distinction. I also think, I mean, you just make such a good point about the outer and the inner. I think I think what we want to invite people into, and I think you'd probably say the same thing, is that we are not stuck where we're not destined to just be the to be the thing or the person that we've kind of been shaped into being by our circumstances. That we do have some agency, even if we find ourselves in kind of a tight bubble of people and culture. um, in terms of the ways we show up in the world, in terms of the things that we hold dear and the values and what we call preferred promises, like we do have a say in those, and that's really hard. Um,
Mhm.
none of this is easy per se, but yeah, I think the invitation is always to wonder about to wonder about our agency and our ability to kind of break free from some of those things we've often felt destined to becoming.
I think so. And I think we have to realize that our own journey is different than other people's.
Yeah,
Even if you read a biography and you read somebody who kind of grew up the same way, similar patterns, similar life, similar everything, it's still going to be different. And the prime example that I can give is I'm sure that there's a lot of people who have brothers and sisters, and
yeah,
they have either one that they're like, how are we even related? Or they feel like they're the oddball black
Yeah.
sheep of the family. And
Yeah.
there's four kids in my family, and we're all very different. And there's times that I thought, like, how can we be related? We lived in the same house, same parents,
Yeah.
same everything. And it wasn't until probably about a decade ago, I was listening to a podcast or a speaker or something. And they said they were saying kind of things that I was just saying, but they said you did live in the same house, you did have the same parents, but you did not have the same experiences or the same
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
because your parents, they treated everybody a little bit differently. Like we're all
Yeah.
equal, but the firstborn, they don't know what they're doing. By the
Yeah.
third or fourth, been there before, don't have to worry about things that they worried about before. So
Yeah.
that really kind of changed my thought and perspective because I thought we're all the same, but and also at different ages, things that happened at home left
Yeah.
different impressions on us individually. So even though we were in the same home and everything was, quote, the same, it really wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's spot on. My business partner, my coaching partner, and I, we've done a ton of work around understanding how trauma informs these sorts of ways that we're shaped and formed, and like little t trauma, right?
Mhm.
The encounters that are not what we would say the capital T catastrophic trauma. Yeah, I mean, I think what you're hitting on is this important piece that says our nervous systems that say, fight, flight, freeze. Um, all of those four people in your house, you and the others experience those things so differently at a nervous system level. That one of you might say this was a huge impact on my life, and the others might say I don't even remember that thing.
Right.
And I think that is so important to remember. Family systems are such a great example of this that there is just no one size fits all in any of this work.
Right. And yeah, with mine, ironically, we're all almost give or take a few months, but 2 years apart.
Okay.
And so, that makes sense of my sister at 10, my brother at 8, me 6, and my other brother 4, even though we're in the same house, ex impression of what is going on, and we'll
Yeah.
say it's an argument with my parents or,
Yeah.
like you said, that little T, that's something, and I use that just as people could relate, the
Yeah.
things that are said or heard or even the energy in the
Yeah.
home would be experienced very differently, um, between
Yeah.
everybody, but especially my oldest sister and my youngest brother because that age
Yeah.
gap is the biggest.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. I think it's a really profound thing to say.
Yeah, so it was very, very interesting, listening to that, when somebody said that same house, but still very,
Yeah.
very different
Yeah.
experiences in
Yeah.
it. So what do you think about this phrase that we hear a lot that I'm hoping is starting to fade a bit, is the "fake it till you make it."
I hate that, Sally.
Good,
Um,
good.
I hate that so much. I number one, I don't know what it actually means. Um, I, I, the first part of my career I spent in a manufacturing environment. I worked for a really large manufacturing company. Um, and I lived the fake it till you make it for a long time. I think what's true is there's never a make it. Like if that's the posture, I just don't think there's ever a make. It's just a constant, um, a constant. I might even say a constant false self to try
Mhm.
to be present in places that we either don't know how to be or we're trying to be or is not aligned with our truest selves. I really bristle when I hear fake it till you make it. We have a theory in our practice that we say that everybody goes to work and does two jobs. And this is not our theory. We're adapting this from somebody else, but
Mhm.
the theory says that we all go to work and we do two jobs. We do the job that we are paid to do, that we're expected to do. But then we also do the second job of faking it till we make it, or hiding, or making sure people don't see that we don't belong, or making sure people don't see us as stupid, or whatever the word is for the listener. um,
Mhm.
that second job, that faking it till you make it, I actually think takes away from the first job. And I might even say, I honestly think this could be applied if a mom or a dad is at home raising kids. That's the job, even though it's not a traditional, getting paid by a company to have a job. I think all of those responsibilities we have, that fake it till you make it is actually detracting from the things that we're supposed to do. And I think my invitation would be is to be whole, to approach the thing that we're responsible for from a place of wholeness, not from a place of hiding or faking or looking like we're something that we're not. I actually don't know that there's any way to really fully thrive if we're constantly trying to fake it till we make it. I'd be curious to hear what you think about fake it till you make it.
Yeah, I'm similar. Like I don't like it because what is make it? So you get the
Yeah,
job, but okay, is that a different job that you want? Like it's true that the kind of like what is it?
yeah,
And then the faking it. Well, I mean, if I'm not smart, like I'm not a rocket scientist, I'm not gonna be applying for or working in a company that needs rocket scientists. So I
yeah.
mean, I can't fake that I am.
Hmm.
Um, if I want to, I guess, kind of dress apart, like I'm trying to think like physically, well, if I buy the clothes and I like the clothes, then I'm not faking the business aspect if I have to dress a certain way for a
Yeah,
job because I'm
yeah,
doing it. I have to have so much knowledge to do something, and we're always learning. Like
yeah,
things
yeah,
change too. I mean, I might date
yeah,
myself a little bit here, but when I went to school, Pluto was a planet.
yeah.
Not anymore,
Same.
right? But at the time
Yeah,
it was. And so were people faking things and say, well, we'll just call it a planet. We'll just call it like, no, it was what we knew. And as we're in jobs and things change and technology change and the world changes, like we're always learning. And so
yeah,
we can't be, I think where people say fake it till you make it is they know that they're learning. They might be scared of making mistakes. That's all part of learning because, I mean,
yeah,
it is kind of the hard part, but when you learn something and you make a mistake and you're embarrassed about it, you don't make that mistake again.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you either because you learn so much or you realize, oh, I need to study this a bit more, or maybe just as we said, be updated. Oh, that's changed.
yeah,
Oh, I didn't know. Like I can't remember when I heard the Pluto wasn't a planet anymore, but it was like long after it changed because
yeah,
it wasn't my industry. I wasn't into it. And somebody said to me, oh, it's not a planet. I'm like, since when? Yes, it is. I went to school. Like I know. And they're like, no, not anymore. It hasn't been for a long time.
yeah,
Great. And I don't think that I didn't feel bad about that because that's what I learned and things are wrong and I'm not in that industry. So I don't
yeah,
pretend to know things or be somebody. I could be working towards it and making changes in my life and making conscious changes of learning things and physical changes, whether it's like eating better, exercise, mental
yeah,
things. Like, I don't think people are faking it while they're making the change because what is the end result, the destiny?
yeah,
I mean, I'm always going to be changing until I die because then it's just not
yeah,
possible anymore. So, yeah,
yeah,
I don't really like it. I think we would be better off saying, I'm learning, I'm trying, I'm doing these new things, um,
yeah.
doing the best I can, and everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So just an example, I went to get a master's degree in my 30s, late in life. And this was well after I had written anything or any sort of paper or any sort of submission at a master's level. Like I'd never done this before. Nobody that does it has ever done it before. Everybody learns.
Exactly.
I think that where in my own story I can see the difference between fake it till you make it versus constantly learn is that there was a time in life where I would hit submit. This was a virtual master's program. I would
Mhm.
hit submit on a paper, and there was a time in my life where I would think, "Oh man, I'm gonna submit this paper, and the professor is gonna go, Kurt doesn't belong here, right? It's the classic imposter syndrome.
Right.
I think fake it till you make it says, "Oh, this isn't good enough, and I don't belong." Whereas I think what you were saying is actually healthy to say, "I don't know how to do it, but I can learn how to do it."
Mm,
So there came a point in my academic career where I could submit that paper and say, "I did the best I knew how to do today." And when I get feedback, I can do better on the next one. So I think you're right. I think there is something important to say fake it till you make it often implies a lack of learning, I think, or
hmm. Yeah.
um, just do what I can so I can fool somebody. Whereas I think we practice our way into being sometimes. We practice our way into new ways of being.
Mm,
To use a cliche term, we walk across the bridge while we build it in life most times. And that feels very different than fake it
right.
till you make it.
Yeah. And I think too, like the fake it is you're fooling people,
Yeah.
right? And I think that that's a difference of where I'm a little unsure of myself. I'm worried. And I had similar experience the first time I had just an article, a travel article published many years ago. And they're like, share it on social media. The more people that read it, the better. And I was like, push the enter button to share, like
Yeah.
push. And I'm like, ooh,
Yeah.
no, push. I'm like,
Yeah.
but then people might read it. But then they
Hmm.
might, and then the other part of my brain said, it's already been published. So it must be okay because it's been
Yeah.
published. They're just saying to
Yeah.
share, but we have that self-conscious worry. And I just don't like the faking it too, because I think when we learn to walk, did we fake it till we make it?
Right.
We
Right.
couldn't fake. We learned and we tried. So yeah, I really dislike that. And I think that's really changed, honestly. And some people are still using it, but now people are worried about what we're saying is imposter syndrome. And I
Yeah.
think that fake it, pretend, pretend. Now it's like, now I'm an imposter. And so
Yeah.
we've
Yeah.
shifted a little bit of the fake it till you make it that's still used, but now more people are like, oh, I'm feeling like an imposter. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, if you were faking, of course you would feel like an imposter. If you
Yeah.
realized that we're learning and doing things, then I don't feel like I'm an imposter. I don't know everything and I'm learning. I'm not faking either.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's really good. Can I ask you a question? I don't know.
Yes,
Can
of
I turn the
course.
table a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
I'm a question asker. You said that faking it till you make it often implies some sort of trying to fool someone.
Hmm.
Who do you think, like, if you are faking it till you make it,
Hmm.
who do you think you're trying to fool? Yourself? Someone else?
Pardon the interruption. If you're liking the show so far, please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. It really means a lot to me. It helps grow the show and the channel and to the show.
Else?
My thought is we're trying to fool someone else. But
Yeah.
it's hard, and that's kind of brings me back to when I made the comment about like being a rocket scientist. Like not me, like
Yeah.
I'm not going to be in a room with rocket scientists because I faked my way into
Yeah.
there until eventually I am one. So
Yeah.
for me, it seems like that we're trying to fool other people until we get there. And that's why we have so much more of people saying they feel like they're an imposter and that imposter syndrome because we've heard so much fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
And if you're
Yeah.
faking to impress other people, of course you're going to feel like an imposter because you don't either have enough. I'll just go keep going with the knowledge part of to be there, and then yes, you will feel like an imposter.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think it works most times? Do you think it actually fools anyone?
I think the most times no, I
Yeah.
don't. I don't think so. And even if it does, it's for a very short period of
Yeah.
time. I mean,
Yeah.
to use another saying, it's like true colors come out eventually.
Yeah.
And it could be just little things in conversation that somebody might say something and then you realize, oh, they maybe they don't know enough about this
Yeah.
topic, or they didn't really have that experience. They're making
Yeah.
it up. And
Yeah.
I think we can pinpoint that fairly quickly most of the time because it's hard to keep living a lie
Yeah.
or faking it or being
Yeah.
that too and precisely pull it off all the time. Like that's got to be a lot of stress on the body,
Yeah.
like mentally, even physically, and then think of what did I say or how did I say or what do I need to? But then we're still learning along the way
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
So I think we see through it fairly quickly. And I also think more and more, at least for me anyway, that I get like a gut instinct and a
Mm.
feeling. And sometimes we meet somebody. And I think everybody can relate that at one point we've met somebody and we're like,
Yeah.
something's, I don't know, something's just off about that
Yeah.
person. And other times we might be able to pinpoint it. And not saying that it's always accurate. I've been wrong. There's been times that I kind of had that feeling and then I got to know the person a bit more and it was just that circumstance or situation. But I think really listening to that gut instinct or that feeling that we have, and the more I find, the more that I do it, the more accurate I am, the more often it comes, and
Yeah.
it's just another technique of figuring things out. In many cases, whether it is about people, about situations, or whatever it may be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's well said.
Yeah. And we all have that. And it could be just little things of, oh, I should go to the store now instead of later.
Yeah.
Or, it doesn't have to be this, oh, that person's horrible. No,
Yeah.
because we all have bad days. I've had
Yeah.
days that when probably people met me, if I was having a bad day, they might think just kind of snotty or rude or just
Yeah.
doesn't talk to anybody or whatever. But we meet again and it's a better day and we have
Yeah.
that. So it's not always 100% accurate. Um, but
Yeah.
I think if we tune into it more, because we've kind of blocked that because we're starting to use more of, we're really starting to use our thinking part of our brain and not so
Yeah.
much the subconscious energy feelings of
Yeah.
things. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard. We all have people that we've met and our friends are like, that might be a red flag, and we can kind of justify it.
Yeah. 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 For sure. Yeah.
Um, which then leads a little bit to if we're justifying or we're aware, but maybe we don't want to kind of listen to our feelings is anxiety, right? And
Yeah.
I think that also kind of enrolls with the fake it till you make it, imposter
Yes.
syndrome, also creates that anxiety of, I mean, will I be found out? Am I faking it? Do I
Yeah.
belong? All
Yeah.
of those other kind of more internal, I use anxiety as more of the internal stressor, not so much as an external stress of
Yeah.
things going on.
Yeah.
And
I
there's
would say,
some
go
big,
ahead.
no, I was to say there's a lot of people with anxiety and some major problems with it.
Yeah. I I want to say something first. I am not a clinical psychologist. So I maybe want to acknowledge that there are forms of anxiety that what I'm about to say cannot impact or will not impact without some sort of clinical intervention. So I maybe want to preface that to say I hold that up to be true. Um, I would define anxiety like this. The anxiety is an intense emotional response to a threat. And I think chronic anxiety, which most of us, I'm not even gonna say most, that all of us have. I would say chronic anxiety is the feeling that the threat is here right now, today, but actually the threat was years ago.
Mhm.
And I think that's most of the anxious waters we swim in is chronic anxiety. I might even go as far to say I'm not sure that that's ever going to go away. I'm not sure that I'm ever going to see a time in my life where I never experience anxiety. I think the hope is I think the hope and the invitation is, can I see the signs that it's coming? Can I feel my traps tighten up? Can I feel my ears get a little red? All those signs that it's coming. And can I then employ some tools that help me pause and respond to it in a way that I desire versus a way that I default into? Um, yeah, I agree. I think we swim in anxious waters. I think every single one of us.
Absolutely. And sometimes I question myself a little bit of how much of this is self-inflicted.
Mm,
How much of I kind of focus on it, or instead of being thinking, okay, this is the situation, it is what it is, because there's lots of times in our life
yeah,
we deal with things like I didn't make the decision or something has
yeah,
happened and now there's what I call the ripple effects. And we are
yeah,
stuck
yeah,
dealing with the ripple effects. And of that, I can only deal with me and
yeah,
how I
yeah,
respond and what I do. I can't really control other people or how they feel. But then it is, okay, this is the situation. How am I going to choose to respond?
yeah,
And I don't know about you, but I know I have in situations go, okay, well, I'm going to do this, but I know it's going to cause a problem. Somebody's going to be mad. Somebody's going to be
yeah,
upset. Somebody. And then we start a little bit going down that rabbit hole
yeah,
of, oh,
yeah,
how it's going to affect everybody else or what we think they're going to say, do, and feel. But
yeah,
we have to kind of pull back. And I have to say, okay, well, I need to do this because it's best for me.
yeah,
And how other people choose to respond to it, because
yeah,
again, it's a choice. Um, that that's kind of on them. That's up for
yeah,
them. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about do anything that's like malicious and mean
yeah,
and things
yeah.
like that. So, an example of with my mom last year, she was going through cancer treatment, and
Mm,
it really messed with her head. Like
mm,
we would say to each other like she's going crazy,
mm,
literally in a way she did, not that clinical standpoint, but
yeah,
how we
yeah,
loosely use
yep,
that word. And so I had to like cut her off a bit because I'm like, you can't be saying these things and doing these things because they don't even make sense. And then I'm thinking about
yeah,
them for the next days, even though they don't make sense. But it's left at that I had to be like, can't. I need to look after
yeah,
me, my mental
yeah,
health, my stuff, and these things that don't even make sense. And it was hard because I knew it wasn't even her fault because her
yeah,
brain just wasn't functioning properly. But then had to
yeah.
be like, no. And that was a little bit tough, obviously personally. But then my brother one time messaged me and said, "Well, I just want things to be the way they were." I'm like, I get
Mm,
it, but they're not, and I can't continue to kind of like be the human punching bag of things that don't
yeah,
even make sense. And so there
yeah,
are those ripple effects, but we have to think, okay, this is what like situation was the situation, and then we need
yeah,
to do what's best for us. And then the hard part is to stand strong with it
yeah,
because that was less anxiety for me to do that than it was to continuously deal with all
yeah.
these like just crazy messages.
Yeah, yeah. I think about those examples like a scale.
Hmm.
There are consequences to every action. Um,
Hmm.
in your example, there are consequences to setting that boundary that you just named with your mom, right? So that scale tips. There's consequences to that boundary. But there's also consequences over here of not setting the boundary. And what I heard you say was those consequences were heavier. And
Hmm.
I think that's the exercise we get to do when we, well, I think it's the exercise we have to do, because there is no boundary that we set that is without consequence, that is without response from others. We My coaching partner and I will often say that when we set a boundary, we change the dance. So if you imagine
Hmm.
a dance floor at a wedding reception and the entire dance floor is doing the Cupid shuffle, and somebody walks in and does the chicken dance, the entire dance floor is going to look at that person and say, that guy is crazy. Well, then what if the second person now does the chicken dance? Well, now you're going to try to get those two people to keep doing what you're doing because now it's uncomfortable.
Right.
So anytime we change the dance, anytime we set a boundary, our systems get anxious and our systems, like you, I mean, you said it with your brother, I want things to be the way they were. The systems we're in always want status quo.
Mhm.
So I think you're right. I think the exercise that I've always found so helpful is which consequence am I willing to bear? And sometimes the scales tip away from the boundary, but I think over time they'll all tip towards a boundary. The question is when and how, right?
Right. Right. And I mean, I often say to people it's tough, but so is life.
Yeah,
And and we have to, sometimes we have to go through harder to then be easier
yeah,
and not always take the easy path because that easy path is least resistant, but generally speaking, I think the most unfulfilling and
yeah,
happiness or respect or mental clarity or I mean the list
yeah,
can go on with all of those things. So
yeah. Well said.
well, yeah, go ahead.
No, well said. I affirm.
Okay. Great. Well, I want to be respectful of your time and everybody else's time today, Kurt, and I appreciate our conversation. But before we wrap up here, where can people find you? And if they want to reach out, connect, see your programs, potentially work with you, where's the best way for them to be in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks. So our coaching practice is called Brimstone Coaching Group, and I always have to say brimstone is not what it sounds like. Brimstone is a species of butterfly. Butterflies are transformed creatures, and we desire long, whole, transformed lives. So, Brimstone Coaching Group, they can find us at our website at brimstonecoachinggroup.com. That's probably the quickest, easiest way. We specialize in group and one-on-one coaching for leaders of all kinds that feel stuck, that feel trapped in those old patterns that we've been talking about this whole time that they maybe just don't know how to break out of.
Perfect. And I will make sure to have a link to your website in the show notes to make it easy for people to connect with you. So again, thank you very much for your time today.